What is happening, everybody? My goodness, I'm having so much fun doing the show here. We are in season 3, episode 3. And you guys have heard me say it before, but I go out of my way to follow and listen to people far smarter than me. Today is going to be a perfect example of that. But before we get into today's guest, it's always important to get into today's sponsor, Fat Nugs Magazine. A global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture to a bridge of the rest of the world. And I tell you what, if you don't have the magazines, we have them here. If you've never checked them out, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's a very, very cool read. Dustin is one of the best on just in the space in general. But right now, probably the most important thing Fat Nugs Magazine has done to date. They're working with Beard Brothers, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed on the upcoming Prisoners Edition. In this edition, we're going to be hearing stories of past and present people incarcerated for a plant, which everyone who's watched this show knows that is absolutely unacceptable moving forward in the 2025 and beyond. No one should be in prison for this plant, and they're doing a lot. If you guys haven't gotten involved, I think it's as little as $250 to get involved with this edition. Do yourself and these prisoners a favor, get involved. Thank you guys so much for listening to that and tuning into today's episode, because today, Jeff Rawson, PhD scientist. I think of him as the Madman of cannabis because I try to keep up. He's so smart. Jeff, how are you today, man?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
I'm wonderful, man. I'm wonderful. Thank you so much. So Jeff, we like to kick every episode off with hearing about where it all started. So tell us, where is the origin story going to take us for young Jeff?
All right. Well, I will. I'll briefly tell you my story of my first experience with cannabis.
Okay.
All right. I was kind of a late bloomer, so I didn't try weed until college, and I was hanging out with a couple of friends, and we smoked off of a Canada Dry seltzer can.
Yeah.
Which is a really great introduction. Terrific first
seltzer can, hey, it only takes a couple of holes, man. Everything else is already there. You got to bend it right, you got to pop it right, and it's good to go.
Just put the little crimp and poke a few holes, and that was what we did it.
Hey, my first time was out of a foiler boiler, Jeff. So, I mean, we just had a marker. We stuck it in there, wrapped the foil, kinked the edge, and we went to town, babe. So I get it.
Yep. Yeah. And that was all the way in college. So I knew the first time that I tried weed, I knew that I really liked it. I felt great the next day. I was like, man, that was awesome. So yeah. So yeah, but
Jeff, really quick, let me ask you, you go to college. Is it part of how you were brought up? Is it where you live? Like, I always like to hear, my wife calls herself a late bloomer too. And so I wonder the story of, were you around alcohol? Were you around other things? Was there a reason you avoided it? Just quickly tell me why the late bloom.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I think I was kind of an anxious kid, and sort of I was anxious about following the rules and doing things right.
Totally.
So yeah, it's really
So mom and dad did a great job of putting that on you, putting on the right and wrong.
Yeah. It's sort of a funny thing because I always my friends in school, I attended a private school, and my friends in school were they tended to be the kids who weren't invited back next year. I don't somehow I gravitated towards kind of
the rebellious types. Jeff.
Yeah, rebellious people, and I tended to be around in a lot of marginal kind of situations. But somehow I don't know, I just didn't do any of that. You
didn't get sucked into it. You straddled the line. You had friends on both sides, and you just stayed Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just that weird nerdy, like straight-laced guy that like didn't do it. But like,
Jeff, were you
I was
already
still
into
listening to Pink
science at
Floyd
this
all the
point?
time.
Like when you're in private school, like is that already where your mind is working? Are you already into science courses now that you're an adult scientist?
Oh yeah, I was really into science. I mean, I was interested in every subject. I really liked science, and I loved calculus when I learned calculus. Um, but I don't know, like I guess I had sort of esoteric interests. So I was interested in art and ancient languages and science, and all sort of like as unapplied as possible. um, yeah, I didn't have like a career goal in mind. In fact, my thought process as like a young person, like in high school and college, my thought process was I don't know, about like following my destiny or something. I don't know. I mean, like,
You felt that way though, is what you're saying? Like you were
or
gonna
like that you just let what you're supposed to do. That I felt like what I was supposed to do. Yeah, I was very concerned at that age with what I'm supposed to do. Like, I was trying to do everything perfect.
yeah. And
What
we're
an
talking
anxious guy I
college,
was,
right, Jeff?
as you can see. Like, wow, wonder why I had so much anxiety. I was trying to do everything perfect the first try every time.
That's a legit lesson for anyone watching. Just as human beings, we'll just subtract cannabis from the discussion. Jeff, that's real shit, man. I think that's a
Yeah.
real pressure people put on themselves. I know I put it on myself, and now in my 40s, I can tell you that's something that I know is a fallacy. I know that's not. I know perfection is bullshit in that way. And so what I'm trying to do is find myself as finding success and measurement in things that I do, as opposed to that finite perfection. Because I damn near killed myself trying to do that. My whole life, because I knew what I wanted to do my whole life. I got into selling cars, making money by the time I was even out of high school. So my life plan, I had already kind of chosen it. And the perfectionist, even though it goes that way, it's a different level, man. So I can respect you saying that out loud. And thank you for saying it. People should hear you say that it's tough to be a perfectionist at any age, let alone high school to college.
Right on, man. So yeah. So I thought that the best way to do things then was to to follow my passions and my interests, and I was very much like kind of a purist.
Yeah.
So I went to college with kind of like no plan. And I gravitated towards chemistry like sort of unexpectedly, actually. But that was what I enjoyed doing the most, and I liked it because especially I got really like what drew me in was organic chemistry, taking that course my second year. And like you in organic chemistry, you have all these structures like like on my shirt, right? And they're really simple drawings that you can make with pencil and paper, but they tell you a lot of important information, and you can work out all kinds of logic on these drawings and understand how reactions happen. And 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 really a lot of the work can happen with pencil and paper. So but then at the same time, you're making microscopic observations about these molecules that you can never really see. Like you can't see one molecule. And but then you're going to a lab and you're working with your hands a bunch, which was really engaging for me. I like to do stuff with my hands. And and you set up an apparatus and you perform some set of operations, and you use all of that microscopic logic, and it informs everything that you're observing and everything that you're doing. And there's feedback between these two things. And to me, that was really exciting. Like it started teaching me that I could just look around the world and just like understand like why stuff is. And it was a professor who tried to talk about things that way, as like, look at all the stuff that you can figure out just walking around in the world and looking and knowing just a couple of things and thinking a bunch more and drawing a bunch more conclusions. So
Jeff, I didn't think we were going to get that existential that fast on here, but I have to tell you, I really like that, man. I like the way that you say that, because in that same time frame, again, I'm on like a parallel track, right? I'm high school, college, like I say, my buddies are doing that. I'm already in my career. I'm already doing what I do, and I notice the same thing. I notice that if I follow my passion, if I do what fuels me, and then the world is bigger than me, like I grew up Irish Catholic, like hardcore Irish Catholic. So when I hit high school, I was like, no, I don't think so. But I can agree to things bigger than me because I can see it around me. So when you as a scientist talk about, like, as you were talking, your t-shirt was like coming to life for me, in like an animated way, where it was just like, look, this means this and that means that. And then I'm envisioning you sitting in a live environment where that drawing seems like you can see the drawing, but it's on top of life. And that's just a really cool fucking way to look at things, Jeff.
Thanks. Thanks, man. I don't know. Like, I mean, I am talking about kind of my passion and my little romance, but like, I honestly, became and remained for a very long time, a passionate chemist who, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm devoted to the science, almost like a religion. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure the comparison's really great, but like, all right. But as an institution, all right. Like,
Yep.
yeah.
I get what you mean. No, and even at a bigger level, it is the point. There's always the argument of science and church, so it's not that weird. But the point is that your science is what guides you. It's that knowing, that having that information. And I think sometimes in our world, we can forget about science and math, as I like to say, and we go on a lot of feelings and a lot of what I think I know. And there's so much science and fact to back up things where I don't have to worry about how you feel. You can go tell your therapist how you feel. Here's the fact of the matter, right? And that's, I think, a missing fact. So, Jeff, catch me up here. So you try it in college. You're a fan because you wake up feeling nothing else but wondrous. What happens next? When's the next time Jeff is involved with cannabis after the first time Jeff does cannabis?
Oh, I mean, after that, I guess it was kind of sporadic. I mean, let's see, like the first time that I really kind of like bought my own bag might have been like a year or two later. I yeah, I let's see, I did construction work. I left for a while. Like I told you, I was so anxious. I had terrible anxiety problems in college, and I actually left for a year about, and did construction work. So
Back to
I guess
working
then
with
I
your
kind of
hands.
became like kind of a regular, and after that, like it's sort of off and on. You know, at times I would kind of be like I mean, there were times where I'd be like an all day smoker, and a lot of times where I'd hold off, and a few periods in my life where I went for years without it.
Really?
So yeah.
And not for any specific reason, Jeff, just because? I mean, just so happened that, or were you intentionally trying to avoid it?
At times I definitely was trying to avoid it. I mean, I haven't always had very healthy habits with substances. And so like that's that's kind of a complicated thing for me. But I don't know, I guess like for me, it turned out that a lot of it is about like understanding, like, again, like how anxiety impacts my life and what kinds of habits you develop and why you really develop the habits that you do, like
I totally understand.
it's a different way of understanding kind of like what's happening in my mind, or maybe a different awareness of the steps I'm taking in my mind and like what I'm looking for at a given moment. It's easy to feel some avoidance about something that you're just a little anxious about starting or something like that, right? And if you don't really think about that and what it is, then I don't know. Yeah, you can.
It can happen, man. And again, when you
Yeah,
talk
you
about
can try to you can try to medicate it away. You know what I mean?
Jeff, I know exactly what you mean. I am an aholic of all the aholics you can be. Okay,
Yeah.
gambling, work, drugs, sex, you name it, man. What I learned in my life was that I'm someone who can. I believe in moderation. So I believe moderation gets me to where I am, and it allows me to be able to be functional of all those things, and it not be something that I view as a negative. I know it about myself. I know it's inside of me to be that person. But you just said it. I've never used drugs or alcohol as a full functioning adult. When I make mistakes in my 1920s and whatever, I'm talking about 25 and beyond, or whenever the male brain is fully developed. I think my therapist said 23 or something, Jeff. Either way, from there on out, I never use it to celebrate, and I never use it to deal with dread. I would use it. I would use it both substances, alcohol and drugs, daily. But when anything was way cool to celebrate, or anything really sucked, I avoided those situations, because to me, that's where my spin would have happened. That's where I would have said, okay, well, we're at our highest. Let's get hammered, or let's go on a bender. And no, it's something that I wouldn't allow myself to do. And people would always look at me weird, like, this is the time to celebrate. Let's drink. And it's like, nope, this is the time to celebrate. Right. Drinking. No. Because then that actually, to me, you use the word avoidance. You avoid the feeling, right? So when it's up here, I want to feel that. And I know most people don't want to feel what's down here, but I do, because it gives me appreciation for what's up here. And so I can't have one without the other. So I'm willing to take both on.
Right on. Well, yeah, I can tell you, I've had some tough times lately, and I think like working your way through those low feelings is really important. Like, it's some of the most important work that you do, and it's really hard processing. So,
Jeff, it's so powerful.
Like, there can be times where maybe, yeah, you may, like, if substances are involved in some of that, you definitely want to make sure that you're having a lot of unclouded time where you are really sitting with those feelings, and you're not just avoiding them, because otherwise you don't make progress. Even if the negative feelings come from stuff that was outside of your control, you still need to process it and really think about it. And because even things that are outside of your control still change your life, and yeah.
And that's a good way to look at that prospectively. And Jeff, I followed your journey, so I think I have a pretty good idea of what you're referring to as some of the more difficult times. And in this moment right now, as we record this episode, I am dealing with something very similar with my father. And so I'm in this whole new world and universe of, like, I don't have kids. This is my best friend. It's a whole thing for me, right? And so I get you, man. I get you. But let's be clear about something, people. This is two male adults talking about their feelings. There is absolutely zero wrong with this. I suggest everyone find someone to talk to. Find a therapy buddy. Find another person that's willing to talk on the same level, because this sort of stuff is a lot easier with other people. It just is. So you don't have to do shit by yourself. Jeff, when things are outside of your control, when you talk about that, with the science brain, does that come up in like how you view that? Like, hey, I should be able to solve this, or this should be able, like, when you go through your emotions, do you have to like shut the science brain off and be like, look, dude, we got to like go, there is no rationale here. We have to like go over here and deal.
Yeah. That's a funny question. Cause like I'm a kind of I can be a little rigid sometimes if I'm not super self-aware. I can be a little rigid, and I can have a really hard time dealing with like new developments or stuff that wasn't supposed to happen. I do like to have like a lot of understanding and control and anticipation about what's going to happen in my world. And so that can be sometimes a challenge for me. But, as I've become, like, again, more aware, of that, it gets a lot easier. And there is this funny part of me that, seeks adventure and goes out of its way to find stuff that's like, it goes out of its way to find surprises, So if that's what I'm expecting, I can do it. I mean, I've lived overseas before, and one of my favorite things to do was go into a restaurant where I don't understand the language and just order something and just see what I get and then just eat it.
So, all right. So like this sort of, it's crazy because like we have two different paths in life, but the way you talk about stuff is the same way I view my life. Like everything we're talking about here, rigidness. Oh man, dude. I used to travel through the same airport terminal, through the same security gate, and go to the same hotel, sit in the same seat on the plane. Jeff, I'm telling you, like seriously, way over rigid, way over, planned and expected. And I've gotten out of it. Again, in my 40s, I've been able to just say, like, none of this shit is actually that important, and it's not that worrisome. But you use the word self-awareness, and that's the biggest one that I have. It's one of my favorite things about my wife. She's just so fucking self-aware. She can just see her own self from the outside, and that's not something I've been able to do until recently. But it's really cool when you get that feeling and you can look around. Jeff, what's the craziest thing you've ended up on your plate with from going to a restaurant you don't know what the words are?
Oh man, this one, like one time I thought that I was ordering kind of like the appetizer and like it was like from the appetizers thing, and I was out with my little kid. He's like 2 or 3, and I ended up getting him like, I thought that I was gonna end up with some like sausage or something because there's like a lot of what they had. But then the thing I picked out, it ended up being these pickled fish. They just bring out these fish that, to my nose, they kind of smelled like garbage. and they plop it right in front of him. They're like, "That's what you ordered your kid." They look right like, "You did this."
Oh man, Jeff's parenting on full display.
I was like, all right, now I want to go with my kids. I got to use like Google Translate more. Try harder.
Yeah, or get them something and then take that risk on yourself. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I can appreciate that very much, Jeff. I can appreciate that very much. So Jeff, let's go from right now. What is Jeff's involvement in the cannabis space? How would you kind of categorize your involvement with the plant today?
Well, I'm a consumer advocate. So what I mean is I am a guy who buys weed. And in the cannabis industry, as we know, the cannabis industry is like much more about people who sell weed. So
it is.
Yeah.
That's why, hey man, that's why we started the show, because I'm a consumer. I don't sell weed. I'm not plant touching. I'm just a dude who goes and buys weed that lives in a prohibition state and has to deal with other shit. And that's my gig. That's what I'm here to talk about. So yeah, man, your consumer advocacy is what draws me in. The way you start talking about the testing in mass and all the things going on, that kind of stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. It is really crazy. I mean, I think that so much of what we've seen is, I guess, like crazy, but maybe like what you would expect when you try to start something quickly. And
and then involve government.
This is like a really complicated industry to try to maintain and regulate. There's just so many different things involved. And so I think that you would expect it to be a messy start. And there's a lot that we don't know about, especially, if I try to get more focused to like my area, since I focus a lot on safety, quality, and information for consumers. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about safety of cannabis. You know, we don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of like longitudinal studies on this. We don't have a lot of experience with it.
No.
Or not a lot of scientific formal study. I mean, actually, we have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah,
So,
sure. We have
right?
plenty of years in the field, Jeff. That's not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
problem.
But actually, you know, now, I mean, you know, that's with, you know, nearly all of that history is with a few form factors. But now we're inventing new form factors really fast. So,
So when you say form factor, can you bring that down? I think I know what you mean. So we're not just talking about smoking flower. We're
yeah,
talking about
different
everything
types
else
of
now,
products.
concentrates, vapes, etc. Is that what we mean when we say
Yeah,
that?
different types of products,
Yeah,
right?
man.
So, not just right. Traditionally, cannabis was smoked or consumed in tinctures. Right. I think that's probably the two main ways. And yeah, or like teas, right?
Yeah,
And tinctures. So,
and now we're
um,
into like everything, right? It's crazy. I was just in Colorado. I'm in a dispensary, and I'm just like, what the like? My God, you know what I mean? Like I'm just looking for the flower, and then I got like 18 choices of flower, and I'm like, just mentally, I'm bad with this, Jeff. But I'm like, just take me to the top shelf. Like it's not a price thing, so I just assume quality follows the shelf. I know how lazy that is. You can stop at the DMs. I get
yeah.
it. I understand, but it's where the way the mind works. And then I like to crack a jar and smell it anyways. But Jeff, so when we talk about all the options and all of that, I think the bigger thing for consumers, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we really still don't really understand what goes into the edible, what goes in, what the making process of the tincture is, what the quality of flower that was used in a dab is. Like we don't really have that to a consumer facing level. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, and I would argue that right, it's also turns out to be quite difficult to define quality in cannabis and assign like a couple of numbers that people would agree upon.
Yeah.
So
I think
right, a
quality
lot of it
is
is
a gray area.
qualitative, right? You pointed out that you start you start by trying to have someone else narrow the field for you and at least present to you what they think are their best, right? And then you go by your smell after that, right? So, you know, that sounds to me like a lot of other people's processes, which are also generally pretty informal. You know, like and then but it appears, right? We see that we see in sales, and if you talk to anybody in cannabis retail, then they'll tell you that when it comes to flower, the demand and the value appears to be associated very strongly with the level of THC for many consumers. So there's still a lot of people shopping on just a couple numbers, but
And
yeah.
again, guilty because when we were in the medical Colorado age, there was nothing like that, right? It was all about just the cannabis and the quality. And did you spray? Did you not spray? What did you use for, and when you did, those are the conversations that we were having. We were just amongst, but Jeff, it was different, man. When I grew medical, I walked into a dispensary with my backpack and 16 jars in it. And we sat there and cracked them. We tasted, we conversed. How did I get here? What's the seat? That was what it was.
Yeah,
And
that's how it can work when it's a small system and it's informal like that. And once you start trying to regulate big companies,
exactly.
like you can't go so informal like that anymore. And I think that's like kind of in a way part of our problem. If I look back now on how I wish that legalization happened in states, well, I wish that they legalize home grow first.
Agreed.
Right?
Yep.
Because and maybe they start by legalizing home grow and let the prisoners out. Right?
Easy
And
first
then,
steps, Jeff. Even right here in the prohibition state of Wisconsin, I would vote for that tomorrow. You know, we don't have
yeah,
we're one of 13 states that doesn't actually have voting control. That's why we still don't have legal cannabis, because it still rests with our government only. We can't even have it put on the ballot for us to vote as people. Same as abortion in this state. That shit is sad, by the way. So any legislator listening, because I know a few of you do here in Wisconsin, you've already DM'd me, do something about that. That's ridiculous. The people have already said they want both their own way. Give it to them.
and
So
take care of that, because the first thing you should do, right? You want home growing. Then what you want is like lightly regulated collectives or farmers markets, right? That would again be really small scale, right?
yes.
And your main concern would be trying to prevent the infiltration of big companies into that and keep it bespoke, right? Then once you see how that goes, then you could start letting bigger companies in and trying to establish all these stores and regulations and testing and stuff like that. I feel like if they'd gone in that direction, the results would have been way better.
Jeff, I agree with you.
It's too late now here.
Well, not only is it too late now, right? And like you said earlier, control what we can. But I'll say this to you as we sort of wrap up the first half. The problem became the only way that we could ever justify, because we were on the front lines of Colorado there when it was all going on, and the conversations were always about how can you get the taxable money? How can you make it worth us as the government with your weed? How can you make it worth it for us? And the only way to do that was with money, and the only way to do that was to charge astronomical money for permits. And so, Jeff, as soon as permits become $100K or more, there's only a select few people in the business world that can now be involved anyways, and they are of a medium to large size. And I watched it happen. It was immediate. You cannot charge six figures and think me, you, and Dustin from Fat Nugs are going to go get a dispensary tomorrow.
These state governments were kind of greedy in a lot of cases. I mean, they were in such a rush to get commercial sales started so the tax dollars would roll in right away, so that they wouldn't have to make difficult budgetary decisions anymore. And because they didn't want to work that hard. So I'm sorry if I sound so dismissive, but sometimes
no, it's not dismissive. It's totally
sometimes it feels like it
right.
really is that simple and worthy of scolding. And so, like they set up in the state of Massachusetts, they set up our Cannabis Control Commission fully underneath the office of the treasurer, with the explicit goal of fundraising. And the number one thing they talk about is their tax revenue that they've generated. And, when they established their medical program in Massachusetts, they did it under Department of Public Health. And it sure seemed, a lot of stakeholders say that it was a lot done. There were plenty of imperfections with that, and a huge number, as there are with anything that happens with like a, kind of a pioneering state initiative.
Yeah.
But it sure seems like it was on a better track, and establishing that Cannabis Control Commission seemed to take a real wrecking ball to accountability for a long time.
And Jeff, I feel the same way. When we were in Colorado in the medical scene, it was perfect. It wasn't perfect. It was perfect for us, but it was a step forward for a lot of us. At least
it was working, right? It was working for you in a way where, where
I didn't get the whole excitement about going full rec. I was like, no, this isn't, because you didn't take any advantage. So I'm a data nerd. So you didn't take any advantage of testing the data or testing concepts or testing ideas for a decade of medical cannabis, or damn near. You did nothing. And then you decide you're going to go full rec. You're like, well, shit, we got to come with regulations. We got to come with this. Got to come with tax. Go, well, what have you been doing? What have you been doing? You haven't tested any concepts under your medical license. So any state right now that's medical only, do yourselves a favor. Start testing theories and concepts of retail right fucking now. You're wasting everybody's time without it, man. Really. Huh. All right, Jeff, you got me excited. All right, here's the thing. That's how we're going to wrap up. Yeah,
I feel it, Sean.
That's how we're going to wrap up part one. So Sean's going to take a breath. We're going to pause for part two. Before we get there, though, Jeff, why don't you give folks a little teaser about what Jeff wants to talk about in part two?
All right. Well, I guess I'll tell you a little bit about the Institute of Cannabis Science and the work that I'm doing now, and our our initiatives for Massachusetts and eventually for all of the cannabis states.
I love it. I love it. We're going to get into the actual science of things, and that is something that I am excited to learn more about. Thank you guys so much for joining us for part 1 of the Jeff Rawson experience. It is going to be great in part 2. I promise you. Don't forget, on the way out, Fat Nugs Magazine. If you don't know who they are, do yourself a favor, figure it out. Like, literally, these guys are the coolest brand running. Dustin and the team are absolutely outstanding. But right now, biggest initiative of their existence, as far as I think Dustin would be concerned, it is the Prisoners Edition. They're doing that with Beer Brothers, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed, spotlighting current and past cannabis prisoner stories, because nobody, and we mean nobody, should be in jail for a plant, especially this one. Everyone, thank you so much. Remove the stigma, uplift the plant, always the goal on this show. Jeff, we appreciate it. We'll get into part 2 in a second. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.